Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. Today, we're going to continue in Daniel 7. You know, where we left off at right about verse 15. We've been talking about all of it and some of it and details of it. So, since it's not a planned thing, sometimes it gets a little muddy, but I'm enjoying myself, I got to say. So, in the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions of his head upon his bed. Then he woke. Then he wrote the dream and told the sum of the matters. Daniel spake and said, I saw in my vision by night, and behold, the four winds of the heavens strove upon the great sea. And four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse one from another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made to stand upon the feet as a man, and a man's heart was given unto it. Given to it. That's just a translation choice, though, really. I don't know if there's a bit of difference between those two things. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear. And it raised up itself on one side, and had 3 ribs in the mouth of it between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, another, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it 4 wings of a fowl, and the beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And dominion was given to it. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrible, and strong exceedingly. And it had great iron teeth, and it devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with the feet of it. And it was diverse from all the beasts that were before it. And it had 10 horns. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another little horn, before whom there were 3 of the first horns plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and his hair, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as a burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. I beheld then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the beast was slain, and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame. As concerning the rest of the beasts, they had their dominion taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and time. I saw in the night visions, and behold, one like the Son of Man came with the clouds of heaven, and came to the Ancient of Days, and they brought him near before him. And there was given him dominion and glory and a kingdom, and that all people, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion which shall not pass away, and his kingdom that which shall not be destroyed. I, Daniel, was grieved in my spirit, in the midst of my body, and the visions of my head troubled me. I came near unto one of them that stood by, and asked him the truth of all this. So he told me, and made me to know the interpretation of the things. These great beasts, which are 4 kings, which shall arise out of the earth. But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom, and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Then I would know the truth of the 4th beast, which was diverse from all the others, exceeding dreadful, whose teeth were of iron, and his nails of brass, which devoured, brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with his feet. Hold on, Anita. Okay. I'm sure that's preferable to the way I used to take care of things like that. All right. And of the 10 horns that were in his head, and of the other which came up, and before whom 3 fell, even of that horn that had eyes, and a mouth that spake very great things, whose look was more stout than his fellows. I beheld, and the same horn made war with the saints, and prevailed against them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom. Thus he said, the 4th beast shall be the 4th kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces. And the 10 horns out of this kingdom are 10 kings that shall arise, and shall arise after them. And another shall rise after them, and shall be diverse from the first, and he shall subdue 3 kings. Yeah. The kingdom is diverse. Okay. Right. The beasts are kingdoms. The horns are kings. But, like I said, they're nested in each other. What's inside a kingdom? 3 guesses. Is it a president or a king? Yes. Don't want to ruin the reading. And he shall speak great words against the Most High, and shall wear out the saints of the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. But the judgment shall sit, and they shall take away his dominion, to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and dominion, and the greatness of the kingdom under the whole heaven, shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Hitherto is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my cogitations much troubled me, and my countenance changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. I don't know that I would call this the sort of the first formulation, but because earlier prophets also spake, and Daniel comes out of a prophetic tradition. Also, it's not like he just makes all the ways he does things up. Just because it's such a amazing linkage to the Book of Revelation here. I mean, obviously that's not surprising. They should be closely linked. But as far as we left off at 14, and I thought it was just not enough time spent. It's not a question of time, but this is that Christ. This passage is an Old Testament passage that really defines who the Messiah is supposed to be and what the ultimate nature is of Messiah. Because there are all these passages in Isaiah and all these passages in other places that we take as other things too from other prophets, Micah, the prophet, Malachi, Zechariah. Zechariah is of course later. No, well, Zechariah is whatever, semi-contemporary, I should say. Well, he's later. Yeah, he's later than Daniel, I believe, right? I think so. But because he's prophesying of the return to the land, I believe, Zechariah. Anyways. So this is a really important place. I mean, for me, it was very important too, because I told you that someone had to bring me here to help me understand that at one point I thought, Jesus is the visible form of God. Because you look at Matthew, there's a voice that comes from heaven. And the Spirit comes in shape like a dove, which seems like that's not his true form. The Holy Spirit is not a dove, an animal form of... But of course, he could take shape in any way he wants. But that's not really spelled out. It's not said what that signifies beyond. That's, it was a sign upon whom you see the Holy Spirit descending like a dove. That's the one. And but the fact that In the Old Testament, there's a lot of passages like Isaiah 53 with the write-off, oh, that's Jacob, the suffering servant, That's Israel. This is not Israel. This is the Messiah. Now you could say, but I mean, ultimately, the Messiah is the embodiment of Israel. It's the embodiment of God's promise to Abraham. Because it's the way in which that God blesses all the kindreds of the earth. That he said, in you will all the kindreds of the earth be blessed. That we all might come under the dominion of this one like a son of man, like a son of Adam. And he called himself the son of Adam when he came. The son of Adam. It's like when he was speaking of himself, but also as mankind, speaking from the position of as mankind. The ultimate man, what must the ultimate man do? What does it behoove the Son of Man to do? Here he is in obedience to God, in obedience to the will of the Father, the Ancient of Days, who sits on the throne, to whom, the Son gives way by subjection. They have a relationship. They have distinctive wills. Christ reveals that in the Garden of Gethsemane. It was not entirely his will to suffer. It was his will to save and to obey. But the suffering, it was not who rushes forward gladly into suffering, but he willingly did so because of the will of the Father. And people would argue with that. He wanted to feel pain. Are you saying the Messiah, our Lord, is some sort of sicko masochist who likes to, he's into that sort of thing? Like he enjoyed it on the cross? Obviously not. Obviously not. Right? Because that's where you go. You either feel, like in order for God to properly understand, experience, let's say, to experience what we experience in the most ultimate way, not just through his knowledge of what it's like to be us, but to actually become one of us and demonstrate, yes, I do know what it is like. To fulfill that, how could he go into suffering being like, oh, I love it. I can't wait. I can't wait to have the pain. And not at all express a willingness like we would express, perhaps. Like, I'm not anxious to suffer. I don't want to be tortured. Do you? Do you want to be tortured? No, I don't. But I know there are wicked people who, if given the chance, will torture me just for speaking the truth. And so by speaking the truth, you risk being tortured. You don't know that. You don't know that. Because you may be in a low-risk area or a low-risk time. But see, then there come times, sometimes in the process of time, it becomes extremely risky to speak the truth. Like how Daniel did to Belshazzar. When he saw the handwriting on the wall, he told him what it said. The other guys wouldn't read it. I don't know if they couldn't read it or wouldn't read it or what. It says they couldn't, but I mean, in some ways, it makes me think like maybe they didn't want to read it. Of course, God clouds men's minds if he wishes. He can hide it from them. That he does not owe us a clear understanding of his will. It's not something that we have by right to. God doesn't need to reveal anything of himself to us. And from my perspective, for hundreds of thousands of years, he didn't. Except that which you saw in your conscience, and every man sees. And we could do better. But we don't. And so the Word came. The Word was made flesh and dwelt among us. So it's very important. And this passage identifies that one who the Messiah would be as a divine figure. You know what I mean? It is not just a mere man. What we see here, he's one like the Son of Man, coming with the clouds of heaven. And came to the Ancient Days, and they brought him, because he receives, this is the symbol, because it's like, don't let the physical places and the timing worry you. The timing of it is not so important as events that are revealed, like things that will happen. He will come with the clouds of heaven and receive from the Ancient of Days a kingdom. A kingdom will be given him, which a dominion and glory that all the nations of the world are going to serve him. That's why their lives are prolonged. And we'll get to that part, right? His dominion is an everlasting dominion. Satan will rise against it but once. But that will be crushed. That little bit of revolt will be crushed instantaneously. Fire will come down from heaven and devour them, which they will not see it coming. No one ever does. Fire from heaven is a very swift way to perish. His kingdom shall not be destroyed. And that's why, it is also an outgrowth of the promise to David, the sure mercies of David, that he would cause his son to reign after him, and he would not take away his mercy from him. Now, specifically, that first applied to Solomon, but also by implication to David's line. David shall, as the prophets later said, David shall not want a man to sit on the throne. But where's the throne and where's the man to sit on it? And it depends on how you look at it. Like Israel has not had, a lot of the intertestamental, I don't remember if they had kings during that period, if any of those guys were considered of the seed of David, the seed royal. There was still, it was never thought to be wiped out entirely. And to the extent that, Christ himself was considered a descendant of David by descent. Certainly Joseph, his father, and Mary, his mother, if you understand the genealogy in Luke to be actually that of Mary, which would be an interesting genealogy because, of course, even though it says, so-and-so who Heli, I forgot what the exact lingo is there, but Heli is actually not the father of Joseph. It's the father of Mary, I believe in that. Was it Heli? I forget. I'm not so great with genealogies, as you know. It's not one of those things I consider particularly critical, and it's not. But, the main thing I think about is that ultimately in Christ, even if a promise goes into abeyance, where all of a sudden it seems like there is no one on David's throne, because ultimately this is the one. It was already written that it would be him. He is the one who would take up the dominion. Here it doesn't identify him as the son of David, but that was already identified in other prophecy. And it doesn't always put it all together because the purpose is not necessarily to give a message that everyone in the world will receive. Because the message as it stands, it is not meant to be irrefutable proof that you offer people so they can, God doesn't need, why would God need that? God doesn't need that. He could reveal himself if he wanted to. He doesn't need to prove himself. The whole point is for him to back off and let us do ourselves in. That's what the point is to see, are you worthy of ever? How do you like life? What are you going to do? If I gave you life, what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with it? How are you going to live your life? Turns out no one ever lives their life worthy of everlasting life. Isn't that kicker? That's why we all have to die. So that's the end of the dream itself. The dream proper. Well, no, it's not quite the end. This is his initial vision, right? And then he stands to someone who's hanging around. All of a sudden he's in a crowd of people at some point. It's kind of cool. Visions are like that. Dreams are like that, right? You'll be one place and suddenly you're another. A lot like Revelation. So I say the things in Revelation we're seen in visions. And they are visions of reality, but they're not are they necessarily the reality itself? Do we have to say John time traveled to the time of Revelation and saw actual things and then converted them to symbols or something? You know what I mean? People say, oh, he saw Black Hawk helicopters. He's like, there were these weird locusts. Like he wouldn't know they were machines. I'd be more likely to understand wheels in terms of machinery. They didn't have a word for machinery, so they said his wheels. Did we even get past the wheels? Did I just go through that without ever mentioning that? Yeah, I did. I didn't do line by line properly. Whose garment white as snow, his wheels is burning fire. I'm sorry to mention that. People often talk about the wheels as being like these highly polished bronze vehicles or something like that because of the color amber in Ezekiel. It's the color bronze. It doesn't mean the vehicles or the wheels as they work. We say wheels. But the fact that he uses wheels, and wheels were what people would understand as machinery. If they saw wheels working, they understood that that's a primitive understanding of what we would call a machine. So when God has wheels, it's things that move and things that are active and probably involving some sort of something, maybe not wheels even. It doesn't necessarily have to be a real wheel. It's just something that strikes him as wheel-like, as working. Some kind of machinery, I say. And like I said, not a machine necessarily, but something that he saw that to him, like we saw, we might call it some sort of machinery or activity that seems to be not alive, but in motion. You know what I mean? Because wheels are almost like a figure of speech for working. You know what I mean? Like the wheels are turning. I mean, we use it that way. And I don't wonder if the prophets don't use it someone like that. Because they refer to wheels all the time. You know, the wheels. What are wheels? You know, they go around, they go in circle. The wheels are turning. You know what I mean? Like when we say things like that, what do we mean? Wheels within wheels. Right? The wheels of God. What are his wheels? What is he spinning? What is he turning? What is going round and round and round? The years, the days, the months, the seconds. They all go round and God's wheels turn and they turn and they turn. Okay, so now we cover the wheels. That's like, I don't know exactly what they are, but I'm telling you, like, think of it from a literary standpoint also. Don't just think mechanistically. Because you have a lot more going on when you're thinking of symbols. Because even if he has wheels up there, they symbolize something. They mean something. There's these big wheels. And I bet they're turning. You know? Probably like you know, whatever. Well, they said the working of it was as of a wheel within a wheel. And we use that as a metaphor for complexity within complexity. Let's talk about the beast, right? There's a beast, and that's the kingdom. And he has horns, and those are the kings. And the thing the outer beast, the kingdom, does by stomping on those three kingdoms is then also done by the beast on the horns. He plucks up three horns. It's the same thing. So you could have a country destroyed without the rulers being deposed. You know what I mean? So in a sense, he does come. The three are set there as an example, and I think it's three. It's not 10 at the beginning because the three are the ones that he really tramples. And I said, I hope you take my interpretation of those in the modern times with a grain of salt. I'm pretty sure you did, right? So I'm not going to belabor that point. So I was grieved in my spirit in the midst of my body. You could feel it, you know? And the visions of my head trouble. The things that I'm seeing inside my mind are troubling. You know, I was thinking about these visions, like from a standpoint of someone who doesn't believe in like magical things like God. You know, who would call God something like magic? You know, like something that is not, because in a sense, like it is contrary to the normal experience of the way the world naturally works. Just like with the Jesus on the pinnacle of the temple, throw yourself down. He says, well, why would I do that? That's stupid. The way things work is if you throw yourself off the temple, you go kersplat. That's how that works, right? And so when things go contrary to that, it's like, well, wait a second. Now that can cause, the reason that doesn't happen all the time is because that causes severe disruption of like, when you don't know what's real and what isn't, you go crazy. That's what being crazy is, actually. When we can't tell the difference between reality and fantasy, we're crazy. Okay, we've lost our minds. And so we want to be able to tell the difference, definitely. So these beasts seen in vision, but if you think about it from a non-biblical, let's say a non-supernatural point of view, it's like, I think this, and it's part of it because God inspires things and teaches. It's always, the prophets are not just some dude who God talks to. They always know a lot about what God, the prophets we follow always seem to know. It's not just like they say things. They have wisdom to impart. Yeah, I mean, it's weighty. You can feel the difference. I can anyways, right? Well, because the Spirit speaks to me. But if it doesn't, you got to think about this, though. Mankind has observed the action of men in authority for a long time and what they do with that authority. And those things are written down in the words of the prophets. The prophets speak often against the men in authority. And that's a lot of what it's about. One of the most important things the Bible teaches is that judgment begins at the house of God. That's one of the things in the secular religion of today they forgot. They've rejected Christianity, and now they don't believe judgment begins at the house of God. Judgment begins with the poor and the needy. That's why when the people in authority, like George W. Bush, has a torture program, and Dick Cheney and all that, they torture people. Then Barack Obama says, well, we tortured some folks. But if you torture anyone, you'll go on the news. And you will be the most horrific person in the world, and you'll go to jail for the rest of your life and probably be killed in jail for doing such things. I don't know, quite possibly. You know what I mean? So there's one standard of, it started with Richard Nixon when they decided not to prosecute him for doing illegal things. Now they're trying to reverse it suddenly, and they're going after the last president because he also did illegal things. But they're like, well, we'll just apply the law unevenly. The law doesn't apply to the important people. It only applies to the people who aren't part of the club. Then it applies in the most strictest fashion. Suddenly a misdemeanor gets elevated to a felony, and pretty soon you're in jail. Real easy like that. Whereas if you were one of the elites, you get off with a slap on the wrist and some sort of probation and a naughty, naughty, naughty. And I was saying to someone that the critique of religion by the modern unbeliever is really 50% a critique of people in authority. I hear people ripping on the Catholic Church all the time about pedos, kids. It's like, what pedophiles infiltrated the church and went after kids. What do you think they're going to do now? Now that no one goes to church anymore, they're going to go where the kids are. Infiltrate those places. Start talking to the kids about their penises. That's what the priest was doing to my cousin. Hey, you know what that thing down there is for? Do you know what it does? Let me show you, little boy. That's what they want to do with kids. That's disgusting. That's not what people should be doing with children. Your penis is for going pee-pee until further notice. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, well, kids are curious. You can talk to them about it in a proper way. I certainly, if they're curious and they ask, I tell them, that's part of the reproductive system. And that's how it was taught to me in school. When we had sex ed, we were older kids, and nobody liked sex ed back then as far as parents weren't in favor of it. In our conservative school district, it was taught pretty much from, it was a public school, but they taught, the only way to make sure you'll never get pregnant is abstinence. But then they taught all the birth control. Whatever. But my point is that men in authority, right now in society, they get off. That's not how it should be. People in authority should have a more harsh judgment. The penalties, if you're in authority and you do something wrong, like a police officer who speeds should get double the ticket of a normal person who speeds. But instead they get let off. I don't hate police or anything, but I'm just saying there's an example of something corrupt. It is corrupt. If I get a speeding ticket, for going over 15, because I usually talk, the cops are cool. I talk them into a warning usually, as long as I'm going less than 15 over. I'll get a written warning almost every time, because I tell them the truth. I'm like, I'm not in a hurry, and I didn't know I was speeding until I saw your lights are flashing, which is usually the case. And if you tell them that and you smile, especially if it's true, usually I get a warning because usually you can tell if you're going 15 over, you feel the speed, and it's hard to talk your way out of that. But there's other forms of corruption, and people in authority have a greater judgment. That's an axiomatic principle that the Bible is teaching us when it says judgment begins at the house of God. That's where it should begin. Those who know better should be expected to do better. We should expect better of our leaders, not less. They shouldn't get a lower standard of justice. The bar should be much higher, so that we will have less corruption in politics if we punish the corrupt swiftly and severely. The penalty for someone in Congress doing something illegal should be worse than drug possession. If you accept a bribe, it should be 20 years in prison. 20 years in prison for corrupt activities or anything like that. We could do a lot of severe things that would make it and then you start coming down, you start prosecuting them. Prosecute them. Like the people at the CDC who did these policies and covered up and anti-science things, shutting down debate, all that stuff, those people need to be fired, and they should probably be prosecuted under some sort of backwards-looking statute that we should pass. Saying that basically if you're in authority and you abuse your authority in certain ways, I don't know, I haven't come up with a plan or articulated this exactly, but if I was in politics and I had time, that's exactly what I'd be working on. That was my job. I hope someone's working on it. Or eventually I'll get around to it, I guess. Who knows what I'll be doing in 10 years. So when my kids are grown up, I'll have room for other things in my life. And boy, I'm going to fill that space. Because I'm not the type of person who thinks about retiring. I just think of accelerating. You know what I mean? I want to accelerate forward to the end. To the end, I will be like, I'm going to race to my final end. You know what I mean? Like I said, I don't want to, I want something to have to get me. You know, something big. I'm going to get killed by cancer or a bullet or something. I'm not going to just go enfeebled. I hope not. You know, God willing. God willing. It's not always our choice. That's the thing. It's like, not as I will, but as thou willst. Okay. So I came near unto one of them that stood by. Because as he saw all these things, he goes from like, suddenly he's at the judgment. There's a sea of people. 10,000 times 10,000. I said, that's 100 million. I think that's right. But obviously there'd be a lot more people than that. But that was how they expressed really big numbers. They didn't go bigger than 10,000 times 10,000. That was a ridiculous number of people. Most of the time, they were only talking about tens of thousands of people, or maybe hundreds of thousands of people at the most. And that was the most people you would ever see is like 100,000 in a whole nation, maybe. And but the tribes were tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, But like I said, not millions and millions. Not hundreds of millions. Not tens of millions even. So that, they didn't usually, and they didn't have a number for billions either. They didn't have millions, billions, or trillions as numbers. But they would just express very large numbers as 10,000 times 10,000, which for most people is an incredible number. If you saw 100,000 people or 100 million people, I don't know if anyone's ever seen 100 million people at once. You know what I mean? So if you saw a billion people, you might underestimate it. Another George W. Bush thing. I liked George W. Bush, by the way. But torture is not, no one, like, that tells me that Washington is very corrupt when they started talking like we could, oh yeah, let's do that. Let's do that. So it's not torture. It is. It is. It's like, believe me, if I was waterboarding you, you'd feel like you were being tortured. I don't want to get, I everyone, all those big mouth conservatives I saw go on the waterboard looked pretty freaked out. Don't tell me, and you're going willingly and you can get out anytime you want. You're not in the hands of the CIA, okay? Solitary confinement is also considered cruel and unusual in certain conditions. Solitary confinement should only be for people who can't be around other people because they're so violent. Or for their own safety, I think, If I was Julian Assange, I'd want to be alone. I wouldn't want a cellmate. That's the guy who's going to kill you. That's the guy they sent to do you in so they don't have to have a trial. Not that there'll be a trial, they'll put them in front of a tribunal. These great beasts which are four kings which shall arise. I'm going to let you, he told me, he made to know the interpretation. At least the basic interpretation. These are four kings. Which four kings, when? They shall arise. Obviously at the end, because the whole thing is talking about the end of the world, right? The judgment. These four kings are going to rise, but it just refers to them four as like a cluster. It's like the end of it, right? But the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Now, it's first thing out the gate, like I said the first time, we win. We win. All right? So don't get too worried about all the things you might suffer in between. The Lord intends to not make you do anything that is beyond what you're able to bear. But also, he will challenge you to be able to bear more than you think you can. And he will challenge you to make you stronger to bear more than you used to be able to. And if you don't assent to that, I want to know what's wrong with you. Don't you want, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be like Christ? I know you think you can't do it, and they tell you it's not something that's going to happen in this lifetime. Whatever. You know how far you are from Christ? Like, Christ is way over there, and you're way down here. You don't think you can get just a little closer to Christ-like in nature in the time you have left? Or maybe you'd rather just check out now because you're perfect. Why bother? You have nothing to do? What are you going to do with the rest of your life? Yeah, now you're saved. What next? Well, there's something to do. Get you understanding, get you knowledge if you don't have it. If you don't know what you ought to do. Okay. He's like, okay, that's cool. We win, right? These are 4 kings. What does this mean? He's like, well, these are 4 kings which shall arise, but the saints of the Most High shall take the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, even forever and ever. Thumbnail sketch. That's the whole story, right? But that doesn't give us much detail, does it, right? So he's like, well, I want to know about that. What about that 4th beast? Okay, 4 kings, but what about that one? There was a lot of action there. I saw the 3 beasts for like a second, and then the 4th beast comes in, and he's just like pounding the living daylights out of him, right? Whose teeth were of iron, his nails of brass, metal, and just, the idea that it's like this is something powerful, almost, like a machine almost, like it's got metal included. That's why some of the, I love some of the art people come up with to try to draw these things. I don't think it's particularly useful though, honestly, looking at it, it's like, yeah, well, I kind of had an image in my mind too, and it's usually not too different. But it's fun to see those visualizations. I would even use them, perhaps, but, I guess I don't like to use other people's artwork. You notice I use all stuff that's public domain, like Rubens or something like that, some artist that lived a long time ago, so that way I don't have any problem, like someone copyright claiming my thumbnails or something. I don't know if they get to do that, honestly, on some level, but I don't want to use someone's artwork especially if it is something they did for hire and then, it was sold and then someone owns it. I don't want to trample on that thing, especially when it comes to biblical things. I'm not like above some, minor piracy, I guess. If, when it's like, I don't want to buy this or whatever, I just want to hear it once, or whatever. I don't know. You shouldn't pirate. That's wrong. But it is pretty minor. Well, and actually, I do consider piracy against enemies. Like if you wanted to see something that was like, you wanted to just check out something that was evil that you didn't want to be contributing to. Now, you shouldn't do that unless it's for a good purpose. Like you have some reason. It's not like, oh, it's evil, I don't want to contribute, but I'm going to watch it anyway. It's like, should be for a good purpose. But again, like I said, when I'm in a war against the enemy, like in a war against the enemy, you do a lot of things that are normally wrong. And they're still wrong, actually. They're still wrong, even against the enemy. God said, love your enemy, right? But we can love our enemy by not killing him and by subverting him and trying to get him, It's like not letting him do all the evil things they want to do. Just because we're supposed to love our enemy doesn't mean we're supposed to let them have their way. We're supposed to get in their way. Do good to them and get in their way. By stopping men by being in the way of evil, by rebuking it, by being the voice that speaks against it, we fulfill our duty. And also we attract that attention, which is necessary for us to fulfill our duty as Christians and perhaps lay down our lives for the Lord. Because if you don't speak on behalf of the Lord and don't speak up for the truth when it's on the line, you won't be called to it. You won't be made to answer for it. You'll just stand on the sidelines. And maybe that's okay if you're faithful. You're not taking the mark of the beast. You can be faithfully on the sidelines, but be brave. Don't tell me you don't even want to be through the time. Because we all like I said, that day will not come. We will not be gathered together with Jesus until the falling away come first and the man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. All that stuff about the rapture is just a corruption of the doctrine of the resurrection where they split it in two. And it's really a mistake. It's it brings up that part of me that isn't quite sure how bad false prophecy is. Because I do consider it on the peripheries of like, well, do you have to believe in a particular view of the end times to be saved? I don't think so. Since a lot of these things are mysterious. Since I'm, so that's why when I teach it myself as not something I'm certain about, I don't, even though others teach it as, well, we know for sure this is how it's going to be. Even though they teach it that way, I don't. We know for sure there is a rapture and we aren't going to be here for sure. It's almost like an article of faith to not do anything to prepare, not do anything to think for a moment, and to encourage people to not trouble themselves even a little bit about the end times, because they'll not have to go through it if they're a faithful believer. But that's a lie. That's a lie. It's like telling Jesus he won't have to go to the cross because he's a faithful son. Sorry. Nope. The saints have to be there for Satan to overcome. God isn't going to just take some scabs at the last minute and toss them in. I'm sorry. He's not going to take me out of the game right at the critical moment. You know, I'm like, here, I want to be your star quarterback. Give me the ball. That's what I feel about it. I want the ball. Give me the ball. You know, I want the ball on this play. I want in. I don't want out. And maybe that colors my understanding. Whatever. Point is, okay, is anything I'm saying like, that's outside the realm of orthodoxy, what you say about prophecy when you denounce the rapture? It's like, don't get so on your high horse you think you know what's happening. If it wasn't even a little sketchy, there would be no debate. You know, just like with the Trinity, there's a debate there among people because it's a little sketchy. A little bit. I think it's clear in certain places. There are certain things that just make it crystal clear. But I get it. It's why there is a debate, because there are many passages you could just focus in on to get one point of view. Like the Jehovah's Witnesses think he's He's not, he's like an angel, archangel, or one in the same. I'm sorry. One in the same with the Father, right? Is that right? And then the Mormons would say he's completely not. He's like a totally separate creature. I'm sorry if I've blasphemed your sect. I don't mean to, by mischaracterizing what you guys believe. But there's passages that they'll use and they make it seem like, look at it, how could Jesus be God if he says this? Or how could Jesus be separate from God when you see he says, I and the Father are one. Whoever has seen me has seen the Father. But Daniel saw him and the Father together. And that's the problem. You know what I mean? It's like, why did God show that? Did he show that like to confuse poor Daniel? To some people, yes. Those, because that's what happens. The problem is when the Trinity goes beyond our used to experience. That's when people revolt and say, no, that can't be right because it doesn't fit into my way of looking at things. Just like when I tell people the prophecy is not necessarily in chronological order. Some people are going to revolt at that and say, of course it's in chronological order. Why? Because that's the simplest way for me to look at it. It's the simplest way for me to consider it. It ought to be chronological. Why? Because I want it that way. That's a simple way. Why wouldn't it be simple? Aren't these things just meant to be understood? Not entirely. It's given in symbolism and cryptically for a reason. It's not given for all to understand. Daniel himself will testify. Shut up the book, Daniel. It's for the end times. It's not for you. It's for other people to understand. Maybe me, maybe you. Maybe this is the time. Maybe it's coming. Maybe not. Maybe not. I definitely think, I always said I wanted to come a little later in my life. I think it's going to come, well, whatever. I fear it will come sooner than I like. And that is probably true. It will come sooner than I like. Woe to you that desire the day of the Lord, for it is darkness and not light. Not that I don't desire it. I desire the day of the Lord. Because it's not darkness for me. But I know what comes before it. And what comes before it is darkness. And that darkness, it's coming for me and you and all of us who are here and remain. The horn had eyes and a mouth speaking very great things. I wanted to know about it. And he adds, his look was more stout than his fellows. I like the details Daniel adds. His look was more stout. What's that word stout? What does that mean? I think I know what it means, right? But funny, I haven't looked it up. Well, not just yet. All right, we got a Bible plus King James. The strongest King James version of the Bible. And we were at verse, 16, 17, something like that. Okay. Oh, we're much more. We're down 20 or something, right? Okay. Stout, yeah, verse 20. Again, this is much more important. It's a little horn, and the word is rab, which means great. He's the great little horn. Boastful, and a New American Standard translates it. I'm sorry, let me go back. Translates it these things. Boastful, captain, chief, great, large, larger. So stout is not right word. When I think of stout, I think of like a short little guy, a stout, because it looks tough. Yeah, we think stout means something that's kind of tough and well built, right? That looks stout. I don't use it a lot, but we usually think stout fellow. We mean strong, upright, forthright. And I guess I didn't know that probably in English it also meant large. I always thought it meant a little short, and that's probably because of the way we use it in the modern times. It does. Maybe is it just me, or when I say stout, do you immediately think of someone who's maybe not lanky and tall, right? I mean, right, not necessarily short, but you think of someone sturdy. That, sturdy would be, I guess, the first synonym that comes to mind. I could probably go to a synonym dictionary and find that, but we're not going to do that. Yeah, again, in it's used in Daniel and these other places. Wow. Wait a second. The American Standard, look what they translate this. Uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance. Interesting. Things, appearance. What the interlinear translation? This is the most like, your most like, again, like Green's interlinear. I wonder if this is Green's interlinear. But anyways, it's like Green's interlinear, which I used to use. I enjoyed it because it's weird. You have to read from left to right, or right to left, I'm sorry. Read the wrong way from right to left. And the horns 10 that were on its head, and the horns 10 that on its head, and the other horn which came up, fell from before which 3. And namely horn this, and eyes which had a mouth, and a mouth which spoke pompous words, and whose appearance was greater than his fellows. So it's his appearance. Chezva. That's what I missed. So it says his look. See, what did it say in the King James? Let me go back. What it says, whose look was more stout than his fellows. See, the way they word that, it screwed up my brain for a long time. I'm glad we came here. Because I'm like, okay, I got to get that straight. It doesn't mean he had a stout look about him. He looks stout. Well, it does actually mean that. I actually thought it meant like, I don't know, like look, like his look, like the way he looked at you was more stout. You know what I mean? Like putting the word look in there, I think was a poor choice. Yeah, I mean, it would be better to translate in King James like to say like this, and to look upon him, I mean, he was bigger. He seemed bigger than he was, is the way I would look at this. He looked larger than his fellows. Even though he was a little horn that came up in the midst of them. He seemed bigger. Why? Because he was a bigger deal, obviously. His appearance was bigger. It was more important. I think it's more, because remember, that word is, you have to understand what it means. It means, and we'll go back to the, Captain, Chief, Lord, Master, right? Well, that's why it's translated. It's Aramaic. Where's the, oh, there we go. Adjective, absolute, construct, emphatic, mask. All right, this is not helping me. Power, figurative of power or influence. Or it literally means great. But it probably means figuratively. Right? We're looking at figurative use. He looked greater than his fellows. Meaning, it's not that it looked physically larger. He seemed more important. He was more, because when you say chief, you're talking about greater in rank. Yeah, I mean, that's what chief indicates. It's greatness of rank, not greatness of size. You give a tiny little chief. You know what I mean? You give a tiny little chief, but he's bigger in many ways, right? Sometimes people have outsized personalities, that their physical, the fact that they're physically diminutive doesn't take away from the fact that they are larger than life. Being large helps you be larger than life. I tell you, when people are around, because they definitely, I always feel when I'm around someone who's really big, it makes me feel, I'm used to being around people who all seem very small, or all people seem, most people feel smaller to me. Usually, and when someone big, I'm like, oh, it's like, and I don't know if that's how people feel when I'm around. Like they feel like, oh, he seems larger, but it's charisma, not really size. We're talking about here. He is a little horn, and they chose, like I said, the choice to emphasize the smallness in the initial part is because, like I said, it's a mimicry of Christ on some level. The Antichrist wants to sit in the place of God, and on some level, he cannot do that without imitating. Just like our rulers do imitate and feign that they care, feign that they are compassionate with the suffering of regular people when they have no such feelings in them. You know, they pretend to sympathize with the plight of the poor and the homeless and the drug addicted and all that, but they don't actually do any. See, because solving that problem would put their friends out of work, because there's a whole industry built around serving the homeless. And maybe not I think the workers don't think this. They would love to solve the problem. But some people in charge of foundations and collecting money, it's like that's what they do, you know, for certain charities. There's no interest in actually solving certain problems because some people are just making a living, serving the problems. And if you don't think that there's a motivation in there that can corrupt people, then you're not thinking properly, because men are capable of being corrupt. That's not that people are capable of behaving ethically. Sure, men can be made to behave ethically, but when we have a system in place where we don't punish people for once you get to power, if you then are corrupted by that and behave unethically, the powerful shield you, because they're all in the same club where they've all broken the rules and they're all should be in deep doo-doo right now. But they're getting away with it because they're using the system to cover up their own evil deeds. But their evil deeds will be brought to the front. And I was listening to this guy talk about it today. It's like what we're seeing in America is judgment already. I'm saying that the reckoning is coming, but the fact that we've been given up to vile affections so thoroughly proves that judgment is here. I mean, like we had to be told. The pandemic not only will cause great destruction yet coming because of the downstream consequences of what was done. They have not yet, it's not done happening, the consequences. They're still in reverberating of all that. And the choices we've made and the directions we've continued to go are indication that, like, we chose judgment. We chose destruction. And so destruction we go. And that's whether Antichrist comes or not. These are just hard and fast. Like I said, the things he sees, like the golden statue, that's like been perpetuated over and over throughout history and all over the world. The degradation of power, from absolute king to constitutional monarch to something like a republic or a democracy, which may be what standing on your feet like a man refers to. I don't know. Like I said, a lot of that is speculative. I like to, some people say it's useless to speculate. That's true, but it's fun. So we do it a little bit, okay? But we don't want to be deceived by our fleshly minds when we intrude into things that we have not seen. I always want to be mindful of that. And I tell you that because as you see me do it, I want you to see me do it with a light heart. I don't want to completely avoid doing things like that because, it does pay in some point. I don't think of being a watchman as watching what the world is doing. But if being a watchman is knowing what the scripture says, and when the world fits into it, you know what to say. You know what warning to give. And there is things to be said. But, just because you have a lot of things aligning with the Bible, which people have been noting for years, like, oh, look at how these prophecies align. Of course they align. People never change. All the prophecies align. They're going to keep aligning until the ultimate thing comes out. That's why it's different from all the other beasts, because there's never quite been a worldwide kingdom like we're going to see with Satan. I mean, we had some pretty big empires in this planet. America, probably the biggest one ever. Different than the English one, but still, the sun never sets on our military. Sun never sets on our military. We may not own every nation, but we got bases all over the place. The sun never sets on our hardware. So the 10 horns out of this kingdom. Okay, so the fourth beast shall be the fourth kingdom upon the earth. Not the fourth kingdom ever, but the fourth of these three final. Which shall be diverse from all kingdoms. This fourth one is different. And shall devour the whole earth. There's a time in the world when there will be three distinctive kingdoms. The point is when the four winds are let loose and all the servants of God have been sealed. That's what happens next. These three kingdoms will be subdued, and Antichrist will appear. Or maybe not next, but it happens after that, I should say. It is subsequent to the sealing. Again, don't be like next. Sometimes I say things like that, and I'm speaking a little bit in error. And that's why I warn you, I do things a little bit in error sometimes. Not erring in truth, but in these things where we don't know. We're trying to understand. We're seeking wisdom from God. So we have to be patient in waiting for that, and also with each other, because it's hard to know. Sometimes things feel inspired because you feel like, wow, that's a powerful idea. It's a powerful idea. Sometimes it's just powerful ideas that come to you as like making a connection in prophecy. And you feel like, wow, that the Holy Spirit is really confirming it. But it's like, sometimes it seems good, but because we don't know things, we jump to conclusions. Because the seeming is of us, I think. But the ideas, I think they do come from the Lord when they are from Him. And you'll know because the Word will confirm it over and over again. That's how you know it's from God, because the Word will confirm itself. The truth will be confirmed in the Word. The horns are 10 kings that shall arise. Then the book of Revelation talks about 10 kings, 7 kings, 5 have fallen, one is not. A lot of it is hard to exactly sort out because, like I said, it's looking at different perspectives. Remember, there were 10 kings and 3 were pulled out. Well, maybe the 7 are the other 7. I mean, there's a 3 and 7 motive here with 10. And like I said, I'm not in the business of laying out a perfect prophetic layout. Like I've seen a lot of people do that and trying to predict the end and all this stuff and this and that and the other. And I think that the problem is, like I said, they want to make it conform to some sort of timeline. And I don't think enough clues are given to give you a complete timeline. We know certain things happen before and after certain other things. But we don't know all the things necessarily that are happening in between those major events that are what sequence. And again, I don't think that sequence of events is as important as your own practice of moral control over your own life. If you can't control your body, if you can't stand up for the truth, if you can't speak the truth when it needs to be spoken, if you're shy about, if you're willing to go along and just be commanded by authorities to do things that are wrong, then how are you going to stand against Antichrist? I'm going to be in the rapture. I'm telling you, you are not. There will be no rapture. There will be a resurrection in which we will be gathered together in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. I believe all that. I believe in 1 Thessalonians. I just don't believe those who have corrupted its meaning to say something that the Bible just isn't really saying. It's because you can lift this sort of doctrine speculatively out of the scriptures. Like, oh, what if this means there could be another moment where he grabs us ahead of time? But there's all these scriptures that contradict it. That's the problem. So, well, there's all these scriptures that contradict that. Well, if that's the case, then you can't be sure, can you? So you best err on the side of caution and be prepared to fight. If you have any wisdom, and if you have not wisdom, pray God He show you it, because that is wisdom. Prepare. And I mean morally prepare. You better get your mind ready. Like I said, get ready to face mocking. Get ready to face the jeers. Get ready to face people hating you because you don't love Jesus. And if you did, you'd bow down and worship Him. Remember, when the true Christ comes, no one will resist Him. When the false Christ comes, you can count on me. I will. It will cost me my life. It certainly will. It might cost you your life even if Satan doesn't come. Even if the Antichrist is, even if we're not in the end times, it can cost you your life. Ask the Christians in Syria who were slaughtered. So what about him? He's going to do these things. He shall be diverse from the first. He shall subdue 3 kings. Not a lot of things given in here. You say, well, those are kings. He's going to subdue them. That's what that means when he plucks them up by the roof. He will subdue 3 kings. He shall speak great words against the Most High and shall wear out the saints of the Most High. He's going to wear us out. He's going to beat us. He's going to have more power than us. He's going to have the whole world behind him. It doesn't mean, like it says, if it was possible, he would deceive the very elect. Because if it goes on long enough, we'd all break down. Especially if we're still alive. I mean, if you just kill us, it's easy to just, oh, thank you, I'm dead. He can't kill us till our mission is fulfilled. And that's cool, because it's like the only thing I care about in life is that I finish my mission. Like, I care about other things, but what I mean is, like, the number one thing I care about in life, like the number one thing that keeps me up at night, if I'm kept up at night, the number one thing that's going to be causing it is me thinking I'm not going to be able to complete all the works that I believe I can do for the Lord, in the Lord's name, in my lifetime. And if I was given enough lifetime, or let's say that I could do for the Lord given as much time as possible, okay? Or whatever. Given all the lifetime I'm having, right? I want that to be done. I'm anxious to finish that work. But the thing is, if I die, it's because God didn't have that much more work for me to do, and I had fulfilled my work. I'm just looking at the potential works I could do, and I may yet do, because like I said, I don't believe eternity is about rest and relaxation, though it is rest and relaxation, but it's the kind of rest that you find in doing good things. I rest in my labors very often. I mean, not that you labor all the time, but we labor in God. The priests labor to serve the altar on the Sabbath. That is their labor. So I would enjoy laboring and serving God for all eternity, because that's the kind of labor you can do on the Sabbath day. That's why Jesus healed on the Sabbath day, because that's what priests do. It's like, that's just all right. The point of the rest is to remember God. If you're serving God, you're keeping the Sabbath, no matter how hard the labor. Okay, well, and again, I'm a Christian. I have the attitude of the New Testament that Paul taught, especially things like Colossians. Let no man judge you in regards of Sabbath day, holy days, eating and drinking of meats. Don't let them judge you. I don't. I won't be judged by men. People try. They'll be like, you should do this. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'll answer to my Lord. Thank you. I talk to him all the time. I appreciate your opinion. You can tell me. I like to hear. You know why? Because the Holy Spirit speaks through other people. So it's important to listen to criticism. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people judging me things that I know in my conscience. I'm free. I'm free. And I'm not going to be subject to bondage. Okay. So where are we time? Oh, of course we're over an hour, right? He shall think to change times and laws, and they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. There's another connection to Revelation. But I think we're going to pick this up in 20. We'll just start talking about it here in our crawl through Daniel 7. We covered a lot of verses there, actually, didn't we? Let's see. Yeah. Yes, sirree. Well, it's funny how time flies when you're having fun. You can tell I like dense prophetic stuff over the broad narratives of Genesis, even though I'm considering going to Exodus next, just because I did enjoy going over that, and I feel like it's been a weak spot for me for a while. That's why I was doing Genesis before I did Genesis. I mean, the last thing I was doing on the audio study front was Genesis and some other studies simultaneously, all of which I've ended up doing on the live stream, so they exist. Anyways, thanks for joining me in the study. I really look forward to being back again tomorrow to continue in this study in Daniel 7. We'll pick it. Wait, how many more verses do I have there? That's near the end of the chapter, right? Yeah, but we're not leaving yet. I'm not done. No way. We have a little more to go. Gosh. Wait a second. Oh, wait, no, see, I missed something. Okay, I jumped out. No, we're not going to pick up at 20. We didn't call that. Look what's going to start this. I want to talk about this more. I mostly considered. I talked about this. We didn't really cover verse 21. We did. We're covering the subject. We'll say 22. Oh boy, not 25. I don't want to feel like I can't talk about these earlier verses because I really want to talk about these more. We did talk about 23. We talked about all this, I guess. I don't know. We're going to just come here one more time. We'll focus on the last verses, probably look at the whole thing, and we'll just wrap it up. I just want to have one more day on it because it's such a deep chapter. I've said nowhere near all the things that could be said about what we're hearing here. And I hope you're tuned in to those prophetic similarities, and as I point them out. So it doesn't necessarily change anything. But it does just help everything align. Anyways, like I said, we'll go one more day on this chapter and then we'll move on. And yeah, another vision. Is all. Everyone loves. I love the book of Daniel. It's very interesting. It's a very different kind of prophetic book, right? It has that narrative section, and then it gets really like the book of Revelation, which is unlike all the other prophets. So, until next time, thank you for joining me. And Lord willing, we'll be here tomorrow. For the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. That's right, it sure is. That should be my catchline. The testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written, the nominated